In the great stone halls of Thornkeep, everyone believed young Prince Kale was too gentle to ever raise his voice. He smiled at the servants, bowed his head to his elders, and never once argued with the proud new family that had married its way into the crown. So when a cold gray morning came, and the quiet prince did something no one in Aldermere thought him capable of right there, in front of the whole court, the hall fell so silent you could hear the candles hiss. And the one person who could have stopped him, the most feared royal in the kingdom, only folded her hands and watched. What she did with that silence would split the palace in two. The trouble in Thornkeep had a name, and that name was Ronan Varen. He was the grandson of Queen Marisol, the king's second wife, and from the day her family arrived at the castle, Ronan walked its corridors as if he already owned them. He was handsome, loud, and quick to remind anyone who forgot that royal blood now ran close to his own. The older lords tolerated him because his grandmother sat beside the king. The younger ones envied his fine coats and his easy laughter. But the people who served the castle, the pages, the grooms, the kitchen girls, they feared him, and they had good reason to. Ronan enjoyed power more than he understood it. He gave orders that were not his to give and punished small mistakes as if they were crimes. A spilled cup earned a servant a week of missed wages. A slow answer earned a shove. And because his grandmother's name protected him, no one dared carry a complaint upward. The steward looked away. The guards looked away. Even the king, tired and often unwell these days, saw only the polished smile Ronan wore at supper. Prince Kale saw more. He was young, only 22, and the court had long decided he was the soft kind of heir, kind, quiet, easily led. He did not correct them. He simply watched. He noticed how the stable boys flinched when Ronan passed. He noticed the bruise on a page's arm that no one would explain. He noticed, and he said nothing, and the court mistook his silence for weakness. But silence in a careful man is not the same as blindness. Every slight Kale witnessed, he remembered. Every servant who lowered their eyes and hurried away, he counted. He was building something in his mind slowly, the way a mason lays one quiet stone upon another. And on a cold morning in the month the Aldermere called the Frosten, Ronan Varen finally gave him the one stone the whole thing needed. It happened in the lower courtyard where the horses were kept. A stable boy named Tam, no older than 12, had saddled Ronan's gray mare a fraction too loose. The mare shifted, Ronan's boot slipped in the stirrup, and though he caught himself easily, his pride did not. In front of a dozen grooms and 2 visiting lords, he seized the boy by the collar and struck him hard enough to knock him into the mud. Tam did not cry out. He had learned better. He simply lay there, one hand pressed to his cheek, waiting for it to be over. And that quiet acceptance, a child who already knew that no one would help him, was what Kale saw as he came around the corner of the stable wall. The prince did not shout. He walked forward, lifted the boy gently to his feet and brushed the mud from his shoulders with his own hands. Then he turned to Ronan and asked, in a voice everyone could hear, whether the grandson of a queen truly had so little to be proud of that he must prove it against children. Ronan laughed, expecting the soft prince to fold as he always did. He named his grandmother. He reminded the courtyard whose family now stood beside the throne. Kale let him finish. Then he called for the master of the court, and before the assembled grooms and the 2 open-mouthed lords, stripped Ronan Varen of his court position, his rooms in the royal wing, and his right to enter Thornkeep's inner halls. The words were plain and final. By the prince's authority as heir, Ronan was to leave the castle proper by nightfall and would answer for his cruelty before the king himself. For a moment no one breathed. Ronan's face went white, then red. He looked around for someone, anyone, to overrule this boy who had never once dared. But the courtyard only stared back. And then a single figure detached herself from the shadow of the archway where she had been standing, unnoticed, the entire time. It was Princess Alira, the king's own sister, the woman the whole kingdom called the Iron Princess. She was severe, gray-eyed, and famous for her silence. In 30 years at court she had never publicly taken a side in a family quarrel. She said nothing now either. She simply crossed the courtyard, stopped beside her nephew, and turned to face Ronan with him. Two royals standing together. She did not need to speak. Everyone understood. News of the courtyard ran through Thornkeep faster than any messenger could carry it. By supper, the whole palace had chosen sides. The servants moved lighter that evening, some of them almost smiling, though they hid it well. The younger knights spoke of the prince with a new respect, surprised and pleased that the soft air had a spine after all. But in the queen's apartments, the mood was very different. Queen Marisol was not a woman used to being crossed. When she learned that her grandson had been thrown from the inner halls like a common troublemaker, and that the king's own sister had stood beside the boy who did it, her fury filled the room. She swept to the king's chamber and demanded that Kael's order be undone, that Ronan be restored, that the insult to her family be answered. The king, pale and tired against his pillows, listened to her long and heard the whole storm of it. And then he asked one question. He asked whether it was true that Ronan had struck a child. Marisol could not say it was false, because too many had seen. In that pause the king found his answer. He would not overrule his heir, he said quietly. A crown that could not protect its smallest servants was not worth the weight of its gold. That might have ended it, but courts are never so simple. Marisol's allies among the lords began to whisper that the young prince had grown dangerous, that he had humiliated the queen to make himself look strong, that a boy who would shame one family today might shame another tomorrow. The whispers spread, and the one voice that could have silenced them, the Iron Princess, remained, as always, unreadable. She had stood beside Kael in the courtyard, yes, but she had not spoken a single word for him since. And so both camps began to wonder the same thing. Had Alira truly approved of what her nephew did, or had she merely stepped forward to keep a Varen from doing something worse? In a palace where silence was her weapon, no one could be sure which way the Iron Princess would finally turn. The answer came a fortnight later in the great hall, before the full assembled court. The king, well enough to sit his throne for one afternoon, called both families to stand before him and settle the matter for good. Marisol came with her lords and her grievances. Kael came alone, quiet as ever, the boy Tam standing small and frightened at the back of the hall where he thought no one would notice him. For a long while the arguments went back and forth, honor, insult, family, blood. And then Princess Alira rose from her seat. The hall went still, because in 30 years she had never asked to speak at a public council, and everyone knew that whatever she said now would decide everything. She did not defend her nephew with grand words. She told them plainly what she had seen in the courtyard that morning, a child in the mud, and a young man who thought his grandmother's name made cruelty a right. She said that she had spent her whole life watching powerful people mistake fear for respect, and that she had never once seen it end well for a kingdom. Then she said the thing the court would repeat for years afterward, that the day an heir was punished for protecting the weak was the day Aldermere had nothing left worth ruling. She sat down. She had approved after all, not in the courtyard, where her silence had only been patience, but here, where her word could not be undone. The king let her judgment stand as his own. Ronan Varen was sent to his family's distant estates to learn, in quieter years, what he had failed to learn at court. Marisol kept her place beside the throne, but the whispers against her nephew died, because no one would argue against the Iron Princess. As the court emptied, Kael crossed the long hall to where Tam still waited. He did not make a speech of it. He only told the boy that no one in Thornkeep would raise a hand to him again, and that if anyone tried, the prince himself wished to know. Then he walked out into the pale, frosted light, no longer the soft air the court had dismissed, but something harder to name and far more difficult to cross.